My name is Lennox Rodgers. I'd like to talk about how I got into a life of crime. I just couldn't understand why people were treating me so different because of my colour.
So therefore they're not going to go to, higher education, so they're not going to get the Rolex, they're not going to get the Mercedes. Lennox, how are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks, Chris. Yeah.
Excellent. It's great to see you. And,
yeah.
We should thank Nick Smith, shouldn't we, before we go any further? Because Nick put us in touch. Nick's great guy. He's helped me out on the podcast. No end. Just got to click a button here, mate. One sec. My focus is out. Hang on. There we go. Yes, Lennox, you're a man that's lived like 100 lives.
yeah. I shouldn't be here, really.
No, I think you speak for both of us, mate. But it all comes good in the end, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It all comes good in the end, and then we're able to use our experiences to give something back.
Yeah, that's important.
What part of the world are you in at the moment?
I'm in the Garden of England in Kent.
Kent, okay.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with like Bromley area?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm from.
Okay, yeah, I've done some work over there.
Yeah, bad luck.
yeah. So I was just at a school just down the road from there in Orpington yesterday. So teaching some year 8 students.
Yeah, we lived in Orpington, Petswood.
Yeah, Petswood.
Bromley. I won't pretend I remember it. I was quite young at the time, but yes, my gosh. Let's chat about it all. But can we start from the beginning? Your family history. What? Was it St. Vincent in the Caribbean?
Yes, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That's where my family's from. They actually had me here, so. And then they took me back to St. Vincent, and I was there till I was 3 years old, and then came back to England. But so I've got 7 sisters, 9 really, because 2 of them are half sisters, but they're not with us anymore. And that was with my dad had another relationship before he married my mum. 7 sisters. I'm the only son and the youngest, and so my father came over sort of like with the Windrush generation, and then the rest of my sisters followed in bits because it was quite expensive to get everybody over together. Yeah.
And Lennox, tell me, did you face a lot of racism in this country growing up? How is it from an insider's perspective?
Yeah, I did face a lot of racism, and I mean, I think everyone knows that Churchill initially went over to the Caribbean and other countries to get help to fight in the war, and there was so a load of blacks came over through that invite. Sadly, some of them died on the way over, but they fought in the war, and then there was a lot of Caribbeans who was given an opportunity to come to England and have a better life. But when in my younger days, I lived in Oxford, and there were gangs in every area. They called the gangs boot boys, and there were skinhead gangs, there were mod gangs, there were teddy boys. So there was all these different gangs, and the racism I suffered was that some of the gangs were racist, and they used to chase after you, and if they caught you, they'd beat you up. But then going to school, there was only 7 or 8 of us from mixed ethnic backgrounds, and a white English boy would stand in the middle of the playground every day about 8:30, and he would shout blacks against whites, and then the whole school would gather at one end with him, and there would be us down the other end and in the playground. And we had some Scottish and Irish who used to fight on our side. 3 or 4 from those backgrounds, and teachers would line up in the classroom windows, and that you could see them betting. And then they would rush at us, and it would be a tear up, a big fight. And they called us names. I was quite naive initially. I didn't know they were taking the mickey out of me. At one stage, I thought they didn't know me very well because they thought I came from a jungle and I swung from trees. I could have. And it was one of my friends said, Len, they're taking the mickey out of you, and even to the point where they used to tell me I'm going to be all white in the morning. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd think, oh no, something's gone wrong. But so there was that, and it got worse because they would wait for us outside school, and then they got wise to us sneaking out the back way, going across the field, and they had gangs outside the front and the back of the school, and you had to fight your way through to get past. And I didn't have any fighting experience. I, in the end, just mimicked what my dad did to me, took my belt off and started swinging it at him. And it created a little space sometimes, and I was able to run through. But most of the time we got battered. And a friend of mine who was mixed race, I think back then they used to call them half caste, because his mum was white English, his dad was Jamaican. And she used to live just across the road from the school. So she used to come out and chase away the gangs, to help us get through. But the racism in my school days was quite bad, and in the community, because I couldn't go to the shops or anywhere without planning my route first, because I knew that where the gangs were, and you had to try and avoid it. So I had that every day, and my parents, they weren't sympathetic. They just thought I was being naughty. So if I tried to come home and tell them, oh, this gang beat me up, and that, they would think I just got into a fight, and they would beat me on top of that. So it was quite difficult. So that's what the racism was like. And it continued through different schools. And eventually, I learned to fight through different means. I read comic books and learned techniques from Captain America, the nerve pinches. I managed to, because I got taken into care, because I got into so many fights, and I used to steal a lot from shops. The care homes allowed me to do some judo and taekwondo, but I never done it long enough to be able to use it in a street fight. But the judo throws did help me out a bit. And
I did the same, Lennox. I did a year of judo at school.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I was quite prone to people trying to bully me, right?
Yeah.
I just something. Yeah, I was quite small and had a lot of stuff going on at home, and people could just sense, and that judo just stood me in such good stead because I'd let them get away, shoving me around once. I'd let them do it,
Yeah.
twice, and on that third time, before they even know it, I'd smashed them onto the floor. I'd
Yeah.
either thrown them over my back, or I can't remember, is it like Uchimata, I think they call it, put my leg behind, and it saved me. It meant I would never got bullied, but Christ.
Yeah, you mentioned that. You just put your leg behind theirs and push them.
Yeah.
And they were on the floor, and that saved me a lot. It gave me the upper hand quite a lot. So I found that really helpful. And I was fighting this white English guy who was a traveler, and he had like 7 brothers and 7 sisters, and his brothers had come to the school to watch me fight him because they wanted him to stand up for himself. And so I kept doing that move on him, but instead of making him fall to the ground hard, I put him down gently in front of his brother, because I thought, if I hurt this guy, they're going to kill me. So I'd done it so many times, they decided to stop the fight and tell him that, leave it alone. No, you're not winning this, But yeah, so it was very difficult because I was scared to go when it was break time at school. I was scared to go into the playground because it was just constant bullying and name calling. The teachers were a bit like that as well, and the school dentist. The school dentists, they knelt on my chest. They were very unprofessional in their approach to sort of treating kids who may need a fill-in or something. And so it ended up that they would start treatment but not finish it, left my teeth in really bad repair, and which caused me a lot of problems later on. I got beaten badly by the rugby. It was my form teacher who also took us for rugby, and I got one sum wrong, and he got me to bend over in front of the class, and he beat me with a slipper. There was a lot of racism like that, and bad treatment of some teachers. The teacher that was on my side was, luckily for me, one of the headmistresses, and she was really lovely. There were some nice teachers, but the bad ones kind of outweighed the experience you had. It just really gave you a terrible time, and it just made me rebel. It started to create some rage in me, and I swore to myself that when I got older, I wasn't going to let anybody mistreat me, and that started something really bad.
And of course, you had the police to contend with as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we had, what was it, Broadwater Farm, Toxteth riots. That was really serious stuff.
Yeah. For me, I didn't get caught up in that. I had my own version of things. With the police, I got arrested a lot. I mean, by the time I was 11, I'd been to court 5 times. I met one policeman who tried to offer me some wise words of wisdom and said, Lennox, if you continue down this path, you're going to be like a snowball rolling down a hill. By the time it gets to the bottom of the hill, it's a big snowball. It starts off small, and you're starting off with petty crime. You're going to end up with more serious crime if you keep going. And his words were true. So there were these people that tried to offer me wise words of wisdom. My neighbors were really good as well, and they pulled me aside and to try and stop me growing up with a chip on my shoulder, they said, look, the racism that you're experiencing is not the views and behavior of everyone in England. It's just a small handful of people who who are doing this. It's not all of us, and that really affected me, and made me think different. And then I had these war babies whose car I smashed into a wall. I saw this Morris Minor 1000 van, and it had the keys in it, and I had a brand new bike. I put it in front of the car stupidly, weren't thinking, and I turned the ignition on and pressed on the accelerator, and over the car it went. I don't think the handbrake was on. I think it was just in gear. Over my brand new bike it went, and straight into a wall. But these elderly people, they came out and they took me in their homes, and because they were in a care home, and they gave me cups of tea and was talking to me, which started a really nice relationship, because I used to go and visit them, and they'd shared their war stories with me. And going through racism, it made me feel, well, if these people can get through what they did in the war, maybe I can get through what I'm going through. And the stories, so that, horrific stories of how they and their families had to cope in the war. But I found it all very interesting as a young child, really. And it's always stuck with me, what these people went through. It was very encouraging. Yeah.
Yes, we mustn't forget the sacrifices that people made, and I think that this last couple of years, I think everyone seems to have forgot the freedom that they
enjoy.
That we should have been enjoying. That's another story. So, how did you get into petty crime?
Trying to make friends as a child, because a lot of my peers, they were racist, and I started stealing for myself, because I weren't allowed to have certain things, and I ended up stealing for them, and then their parents wanted things. So I kind of upskilled and started stealing, like maybe a hairdryer out of boots, or curling tongs, and various things that mums mainly wanted, that they would ask for. I had this coat that you could put your hands through the pockets, and your hands could come out the front. So I was able to pick up an item and slide it around the back of my coat, and I managed to slide quite a few items and be able to walk out, because they didn't have the alarms then, but they did watch you a lot. They a black person coming into the shop, we were watched more than anyone else. I made friends by stealing, and the parents made their children sort of not be so horrible to me if I got them the goods. So that's how I got into it. But it escalated because, I went through different things. I was sexually abused from about the age of 7. I was raped at the age of 13. I was groomed to be in a gang, to be a pimp, at the age of 14. And where I had been put into care and moved from place to place, I picked up some of the bad behavior of the boys that I lived with, and sometimes girls in the children's home, who committed petty crime. I got involved with them, and as I got older, well, I went to an approved school, and which was like a boys' Centrinian school, and I committed more crimes in there as well, and I wanted to join the army. Because the place was run by, ex-army and Air Force guys, and I thought it might be a good career. I wanted to do mechanics in the army. So when I eventually went to the army careers, I had to take an aptitude test, and my first time I scored 75 out of 100, which was not bad score. But they said to me, you have to score 80 plus to join the REME. So I said, so they said, try again in 6 months. Whereas I thought they should have said to me, why don't you join the transport regiment, learn to drive everything, and then try and get a transfer to learn to fix everything. But they didn't advise me like that. And I had to wait 6 months before I could take the test again. And I wasn't in full-time education. So when I went and took the test again, my scores were much less. And so I didn't get into the REME, and I ended up trying to live life myself. But I ended up getting into crime because it was hard to get jobs. And to try and get into a good career. I went round in circles a lot, and my fighting skills had improved a lot then, and I had even more rage. So I was headhunted by 2 gangs. I was headhunted by a drug dealing gang who all their guys who they used as enforcers, and they used to rob other drug dealers so they can control a bigger area. They all had an accident because they went to rob a drug dealer, and they took with them foolishly imitation firearms. And the drug dealer lived in a townhouse, and they got to the top floor where he was and held him up. But he noticed that the guns they were using were imitation, so he put his hand behind the sofa and pulled out a real gun, and they all kind of crapped themselves and jumped out the top window of a townhouse and broke arms and legs. So this drug dealing gang, had heard about my reputation because I was committing crimes myself, and I was doing it successfully, and they wanted me to work with them. So, I agreed in the end, and they used to use me as an enforcer. There were other drug dealers who borrowed drugs off them on credit, didn't pay on time or didn't pay it back, and they sent me to get the money back. And I always came back with it, and they used to send me to places like Brixton, sometimes to score kilos of cannabis for them, and there would be gangs outside waiting to rob you. And so I never got robbed. I went prepared, and I sort of lived like I had nothing to lose. But I was also headhunted by, I used to go to a particular pub we called the Labour Exchange, and it was called that because lots of criminals used to use it, and it was where they went to have a drink and to get a job. So you could go there and people would tell you about a burglary you could do or an armed robbery and stuff, and there would be people who had nicked loads of food and stuff from the supermarkets, big roast joints and stuff, and you could get it cheap. And this guy from an organized crime gang in London had heard about me, and we had a drink together, and then the next thing I knew, he was taking me to London, and I met a group of people in a bar in a posh bar in Marylebone, And I ended up with a mentor who owned a jeweler's shop at the and lived at the back of Oxford Street, was chauffeur driven. The people I met bankers and other business people who were part of this gang. There was East End gangsters who were around for the craze, some of them, and there was solicitors. Through some of the work I'd done there were solicitors involved who used to represent criminals and also take drugs in, because at one stage they weren't searched because they were from the illegal team. And there was even corrupt police and corrupt politicians in there, but the corrupt police and politicians I never got to meet. I only got to hear about through the other gang members, and plus at one stage they wanted me to commit a murder because there was two multi-millionaire guys who had a grievance. They had racehorses, and one of them was poisoning the other one's racehorses, and he wanted to pay to have him killed. And the money he was offering initially was just a few grand. And my mentor said to me, don't do it for anything less than 100 grand. And so the price was agreed. And so because we used to go to rugby, there was an arms dealer up there. We used to buy our guns and stun guns from. And so that's where I would have got my, I thought I need to get a sniper's rifle and take this guy out from a distance. But before I could do it, I had to do this job. I think they had something in a safe. I was taken to a travel agent's where they had a safe, and there was lots of money in there and travelers' checks, but there was also something else in there that they wanted. They didn't tell me what it was specifically, but I went there with the guy who had introduced me into the gang. You had to wear suits and everything. I couldn't be dressed like I am now in a tracksuit. I only dressed in a tracksuit to commit crime, so I wore suits all the time, and especially to go to a posh bar in Marylebone. So one of the managers, a manageress of this travel agents, took me and this guy in after it closed and showed me where the safe is, showed me where they keep the combination to the safe in a book on a bookshelf. She left a small toilet window open, and it was big enough for my mate, who was really skinny, to get through. And we were going to do it on a Saturday. The football was on, so the police were occupied. And so I waited outside while my mate got in, and apparently the manager, not the manageress, hadn't locked the safe. And 3 hours he was in there, and he came out supposedly empty-handed. And he said he couldn't get into it. And so I was really disappointed, because with this organized crime gang, there's no room for failure. I did everything they wanted. I made sure and got away with it. Even went jogging and training to prepare my mind and my body to be able to do certain jobs they wanted me to do. I did 22 armed robberies. And so when he was telling me, he couldn't get into the safe, and that, time had gone on and everything like that, and so it became a bit unsafe to be hanging about outside this shop. I never saw him again. So it could be that he got what he was supposed to. A week later, I had gone there with someone else, and we did an armed robbery of the place, and we cleaned the safe out and got away. But what they wanted wasn't there. And so that was the start of my relationship with them breaking down, you see.
Did you ever find out, Lennox, what it was?
No, I didn't find out what it was, but they weren't interested in the money. You know, I think there was about 40 grand in cash and travelers checks, and I never found out what it was. So I was allowed to have all the money, but they wanted this particular thing. But I'm sure my mate got away because he just disappeared. He just was not seen ever again by any of our group, and he was a regular. So I put two and two together and thought he must have got it, but I couldn't get at him, you know. So yeah. But one of the strangest things was I was introduced. I had to go to Paddington Station, and I met a guy at Paddington Station who introduced me to one of the biggest drug rings, organized drug rings I've ever seen. And he showed me around at Paddington Station, and he used to point out different people, someone on the platform, you know, people in the offices, the guy at left luggage. And he said, you wouldn't think that they were involved in anything. And he says, he was telling me that they were involved in the drugs rings. They had walkie-talkies. Everyone knew when the police were about. They were steps ahead, you know, and they operated a massive drugs ring from Paddington Station. You know, being involved in that type of organized crime with those types of criminals, you know, bank managers who did fraud with big shares, you know, and they had yachts and various things, you know, and went on lovely holidays all the time. It was an eye-opener, you know, compared to these wannabe street thugs who operated drugs, you know, and the drugs gang wanted to control all of Oxford, but there was a couple of guys who wouldn't join them, and they also had competition with some of the Indians and people from Eastern Europe, and they did want me to take out these Indian guys, but they also wanted me to try and force these black guys who wouldn't do it to sell drugs for them. And I said, no, I ain't going to sort them out for no reason, just because they won't work for you. And so they knew what kind of person I was. So in the end, they told me that these black guys, they were giving drugs to children, class A, you know, cocaine and heroin to little kids. And that was enough to make me think, I'm gonna take them out. So I went to one of these guys' houses. I didn't have any balaclava on or anything. Apart from my knife, I didn't carry anything else. And a couple of black guys who had been injured and now healed up, you know, now healed up from that jumping out the window. They came with balaclavas and guns. And so I knocked on the door and the guy opened and we came in. We didn't know the house was under surveillance. And I made him, we sat at his dining table and I made him get his drugs, and he got a big pile of heroin. And I said, you've been giving drugs to kids. You're going to sit there and eat that. So, and he was begging for his life. And he was trying to tell me, oh, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. I've not given any drugs to kids. And I was whilst I was grilling this guy, these other two guys were robbing his house. And he had a big Rottweiler dog. His missus was hiding in another room. And, you know, within a short space of time of this happening, there was a knock on the door and someone shouted out, "Armed police." And everybody just ran. We ran upstairs. The two guys with me jumped out the window. One got away, and the other one was fighting his way through police because he was a kickboxer. And he pistol whipped one officer so bad it nearly lost his eye. His eye was sort of almost detached from his socket. And there was police everywhere, and I had nowhere to run. So I went into this big wardrobe, got all the clothes and covered myself with it and shut the door. Every now and again, this dog would come sniffing around. And I was in there for about 4 hours until the scenes of crime officers came. And it's when they opened the wardrobe and the clothes started to move that they freaked out. They thought, this is a ghost. And so, because the guy I was grilling, he kept coming and saying, shouting from a distance that it's okay, it's safe, come out. And I could still hear radios, and I thought this is a setup. Yeah, I ended up getting arrested and going to prison for that. And I made this guy I was grilling come and see me, and I said, "You're going to tell the police that I wasn't there for that. You know, I didn't, you know, because I wasn't wearing a balaclava or anything. I only was invited there by you as a friend." And he wrote down all that we said in front of one of my mates after the visit, and to send to the police to get me off. But because my mates from the drug dealing gang, they were using people to bring me loads of drugs in prison, and I was getting rid of it. I was making lots of money. I think I was making £100 a day. And so what they decided to do was not to give that letter to the police. They wanted to keep me in. And when I found out about it, I was upset and angry with them because I wanted bail so I could be with my girlfriend and that and have my freedom. And they just wanted me to keep selling drugs in there for them, and I wouldn't. You know, I mean, I had to take the business away from the existing drug dealers in the prison. And where I didn't take heroin myself, I gave bigger amounts of drugs. I used to have a drug addict who used to test the heroin for us. And, you know, we gave bigger deals, and before long, everyone came to us. And so we controlled the heroin and was making lots of money and everything. And then this Indian guy was going to get robbed, and he was part of the Indian gang that my gang wanted me to, you know, to sort out. And so he came to me for protection, and him and his brothers paid me lots of money, gave me more drugs to keep their brother safe. And I did that as well. But yeah, I fell out with the drug dealing gang. I said, what you've done to me is wrong, you know, and if you ever come in here, I'll make sure you have the worst experience ever. I'll get people to rape you and stuff. I told them, you know, and yeah.
Was it like that in the prison? Did these horrible things happen to people?
Oh gosh, yeah. You know, I mean, one time this guy was getting raped every day. But where I'd been sexually abused and raped, I had said to this guy, look, we can stop that happening to you if you want. And he was so terrified. He said, please don't get involved. You know, I'm so scared what would happen. But we tried to convince him, me and, you know, a couple of boys, that we would proper sort this guy out. He won't be in any position to harm you again. But he just wasn't convinced. But the violence was bad. Yeah, there was a lot of that. There were guys who got into debt, and they would say, right, we don't want the money. You're going to work the debt. You're going to clean my cell, iron my clothes, make my tea, clean my toilet. Because I'm doing a long time, you're going to kneel down and bend over when I tell you. And there was things like that. There was a guy who came from another prison, and he was in this cell, and this guy in the cell said to him, have you let your mum know that you've moved prisons? And he said no. He's pulled out a mobile phone and said, ring your mum, tell her where you are and that. And so he rang his mum, and before he could say, before his mum could really speak properly, he grabbed the phone and told the mum, listen, I've got your son here, and you're going to bring some drugs up for me, or else we're going to hurt your son every day. So I'm not laughing because it's not funny, but
no, it's just, I get it. It's just extreme. Can I tell you a little story about my mate Simon, who's in a couple of the books I've written? He's dead now, God bless him. But he was in Dartmoor, right?
Same.
And I know you've been in Dartmoor, Lennox, right? He said one morning, well, in the evening when they locked the cell doors, one lad was sharing a cell with a Chinese guy. He said the Chinese guy pulled out like the toothbrush with the razor blades on it.
Yeah.
And he held the other guy down all night long, like just cutting him, and raping him. In the morning when he opened the cell, the little lad, I think he was a younger lad, he just ran out naked, head to toe in blood, ran straight to the governor's office, right? The Chinese lad picked up his water pot and went to get water for a cup of tea.
As if nothing happened.
Yeah, as if nothing. Jesus Christ, I don't know how you'd ever get over something like that.
Well, I mean, I was on a unit in Dartmoor where everyone was in single cells, but there were some who were sharing. There were guys who used to wedge their door because at night, prison officers would open their doors and give them a hiding. So they started to wedge their door so that if they did unlock the door, they couldn't get in. So there were things like that. I was on an exercise yard, and there were two black guys having a fight. And the officers, there's two officers who are in a cage, and they're watching. And but they didn't call for help straight away. I mean, the way it works is, if the officer had a dislike to you, maybe you told him to fuck off or something on a previous occasion, and now you're in a fight and you're losing, he's going to turn to his mate and say, oh, did you see the football last night? While you get a pasting, and then blame you for it. But anyway, these guys were fighting, and the one who was losing started to run, but there's nowhere to run because you have to walk around in circles. Well, you used to at one stage, and then they kind of relaxed that rule and let you just hang about if you want as well. But so there was nowhere to run. And in the end, he got tired running around, running away from this guy, and the other guy knocked him to the ground, knelt on both arms, put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a razor blade and turned his face into a jigsaw puzzle. But in Dartmoor, there was a guy who used to drink his own urine and eat his own feces. And, there were guys with mental health issues who walking around, just with their body not looked after, their hair unkept, and sometimes their trousers falling down, and they didn't care. And there were sort of all sorts of issues. There was racism because all the prison officers who got into trouble in other prisons for perhaps being involved in the death of an inmate, perhaps a female officer has had sex with a prisoner, all those types of issues. They got transferred to Dartmoor prison. One officer was racially abusing a black guy who was a boxer, and he took it for 3 months. And then one morning when he opened the black guy's door, the black guy pulled him in, shut the door, and all you could hear was screams where he was beating him. But obviously, you never saw the black guy again because, in the punishment wing in Dartmoor, you see a lot of blood on the walls and the floor sometimes because the officers, they get their own back. So there was a lot of, there was a group of guys who ran out of tobacco, and they cut holes in their pillowcases because Dartmoor's so far away from everywhere. You see all weathers in a day. The water is greeny brown, and it's really a harsh place. And they used to send you up on the quarry, and you used to have to smash stones. that was one of the jobs. So it was, and people used to talk about the Dartmoor stare because there was so much knife crime that people made sure their backs were to the wall. They were scared to expose their back because someone would come up to them and stab them. People sometimes had, magazines around their waist, and they took precautions. It was, and they talked about the Dartmoor stare because everybody was kind of like, they had this look they didn't trust anyone. They stared. It was a horrible experience to be in Dartmoor. It was cold, and you didn't have a lot. They weren't the facilities there that you would see at some other prisons. But I think the way they did the visits and things, because you would stay overnight at one of the guest houses, and you could have all-day visits, and your visitor could leave and go to the toilet and then come back, and you could. So I think there was a way to smuggle drugs easy, and it kept the prison a bit quiet. But there, it had a huge number of inmates, and a large population of it was escapees, guys that had tried to escape and failed, and they were put in these striped overalls, and there was lots of them there. It was a huge prison. But these group of guys, they made holes in these pillowcases, and they robbed the prison canteen, and they jumped over the counter, because unlike in some prisons where you fill out a form and you hand it in and they bring your canteen for you, in Dartmoor you was actually allowed to physically go to the canteen and queue up and order what you needed if you had the money in your private spends. But these guys, they went there and they jumped over the counter, beat the officers, and they robbed loads of tobacco and everything. Where are you going to go? There was nowhere for them to go. But there was a lot more tobacco floating about the units than there had been. These guys, they got severely punished for all that, but it was such a crazy place,
My friends' kids, right, when they was teenagers, young, like we're talking like maybe about 12 or 13. My friend lived at Princetown, which friends at home. That's where Dartmoor is. It's up at Princetown.
Yeah, that's right.
But, they found an escaped prisoner living in a garden shed. Wow. And rather than hand him in, they started smuggling him, bringing him food and everything. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
And it got in all the papers that these two boys had been looking after this. I thought that's a lovely story.
Yeah. Well, there was a couple. There was a guy who escaped in the swill bins from Dartmoor. And that was in all the papers. But he'd got away. And then these twins in another prison had swapped. I swapped places. Um, uh, and because I think the prisoner was actually allowed to wear, because you can wear your own clothes in some prisons if you put an application in, and people would come, your visitors will come and bring you clothes, and then you would hand some out, so they were dressed the same.
I think the Krays did that at one time, didn't they? The Kray twins, I think they swapped places at one time, and when the officers found out, they had to let him go, of course, because he was in, there was no charges against him.
Yeah. Well, I didn't hear that with the Krays. But like I know these guys were in a prison in Wales, in Cardiff, and that was big news in the papers. But yeah, there was lots of escape attempts around the country. I'd been to 16 different prisons, it was Dartmoor was a horrible experience. But one of the guys who helped me, Brian Greenaway, he wrote a book called Hell's Angel, and he was the leader of a Hell's Angel chapter. He turned his life around. He used to visit me in Wandsworth, and every day, and coach and mentor me, and he helped me to turn my life around as well. But Dartmoor is a horrible place. They come out, if you're in a single cell, well, it didn't matter, single or double, the light switch is on the outside, and so the officer used to come round at night, 8 o'clock, and turn your light off. No, 10 o'clock, you turn your light off. It was horrible. There weren't no toilets in your cell. You had to use a bucket to do your business. It's a horrible place. Officers were horrible, but yeah.
They got an amazing museum up there. Just out on the other side of the road from the prison, there's the prison museum, and it's fascinating to see all the weapons and all the crack pipes and all this sort of stuff.
And they used to make prison hooch. I've seen lots of because I used to take kids into prison, and they used to show you all that stuff as well. And so they've got that kind of thing in prisons around the country. Confiscated weapons. I mean, some of the creativity of prisoners to make the weapons that they did, it's just amazing.
There's also that thing where you hook a cable up to the strip light. Do you know that one? And you even though it's just one cable, you can run your electrics off it.
Well, people tried to make tea in their plastic cup, but I would say about 7 or 8 times out of 10, when they hooked the wire up to the lighting system, it blew all the electric along that side of the landing. So the whole until someone had sort of held their hands up, that whole side of the landing would be punished. They'd be on a kind of lockdown regime, while the other side would be okay. So that's what used to happen. But I never tried to do it. I've been in a cell when my cellmate's done it, and he's blown the lights. The odd time it works, because you really have to know what you're doing. You get a kind of warm cup of tea, and we had tea leaves, and so he would put the tea leaves in a sock and make the tea like that. It was disgusting, but that's what we used to do. Yeah.
Did you ever try and escape, Lennox?
I tried to escape, yeah, but I didn't try to escape in the way some guys have. I thought I'd try and get myself to outside hospital. So I I mean, I used to use the gym a lot, and I was quite a wimp when it comes to pain and stuff, you know. So my cellmate, in the end, I got him to cut my hand. He's cut my hand because I tried to do it with a blade and it didn't go deep enough. I thought if I do that, they'll take me to outside hospital, and we did it at night. And also, I put a claim into the prison because we had we'd got the an old sort of blanket to use as curtains, and I said I was standing on a chair and I slipped off and my hand went through the glass. So I said that, but so he cut my hand deep. They took me to outside hospital. But what they handcuffed me and then handcuffed me to a prison officer who had a long chain, and they took me in the hospital. And you know, I had a car waiting, a guy in a car outside the hospital waiting for me to get out. The football was on, so it was busy, and I wanted to go to the toilet, so they came with me and they let me go in one of the cubicles, but there was this long chain attached to one of them, and so I couldn't get away. And then when I was in the hospital bed, they cuffed me to the bed as well, and the doctor told them to uncuff me from the bed, and they said no, not until you put him out. So I had this injury for nothing. And so while my hand was injured, that's when you get the officers. They be a bit more horrible to you, because the moment you start to react, they'll grab that bad hand, you know. So and even the doctor, when it came to taking the stitches out, the prison doctor, I think it was around the Christmas time, and I could smell the alcohol off him, you know, and I didn't want him to touch my hand because he just wasn't in the right condition to be doing that, you know. But yeah, so I've got this massive scar. I lost the feet. I got tingling in one of my fingers. So I got unnecessary damage through trying to escape. So the other places I would have tried to escape from was magistrates' court, because where some people have jumped over the dock and ran out. Some have got away and some haven't, because there's loads of police around and that. But I wanted to try that, and I remember one time I didn't jump over the dock, but I was downstairs in the cells, magistrate cells, with a co-defendant of mine. And we planned, because it was retired policemen who were looking after us. And, you know, there were a couple of them that was overweight. And we thought, oh, yeah, we could overpower them and get out. But while we were waiting, because, you know, after your case is dealt with, often you have to wait till about 5:30 or 5 o'clock before they're ready to take you back to prison, because they want to take a full van or as many as possible. So so while we were waiting, we had some cannabis, and we smoked some cannabis. And the guy I was with, he was the kickboxer from the other job, and he thought, yeah, he's gonna do it, you know. And so we were waiting one at a time behind each other, and they had the van open, and one of the police officers came to grab him, and he started. So he thought, right, I'm going to smack him. It was all slow motion. He was unable to fight properly because he was so relaxed from the cannabis, and his movements were slow motion. It was just weird to see. And the officer, being an overweight guy, he just kind of uh, he just like twisted up his arm, put it behind his back, and got him in a hold. Stuck him, chucked him in the van. So easily. Whereas this guy, he did kickboxing, and if he hadn't been under the influence of cannabis, he would have been able to move. But it was all slow motion, and I just couldn't believe. So that kind of put me off from, because I'd been smoking as well, and I thought, nah, it's not a good time to try it. You need to have your wits about you. But yeah, so and also I had mentors in prison who were old school criminals, and they used to teach me how to fight, not to fight the officers, but to fight, by using, finding out about the rules and using that to fight. So they used to make me go to the library, read the standing orders, which and you learn to do things like, if you're getting searched, you can accuse the officer of feeling up your groin, and so you did things like that. Or if you had a grievance with a particular officer and he was going to lock you in your cell, you let him do it, and then afterwards you maybe headbutt the bed with your nose, make your nose bleed, smear the blood over your face, and then you press the emergency bell and tell the officers you want to see the governor. This officer that locked you up called you a black bastard, and he punched you in the face. And prisoners, I mean, they got into fights with each other, and then they got another prisoner from the kitchen to throw some butter on the floor, and they slipped. A couple of guys got paid from the prison £800 through something like that. So my criminal mentors, they taught me to fight that way rather than fight them fist. Whereas there were other big inmates who used to fight them. Even Charles Bronson, he used to take them out. He'd wrap his t-shirt around his knuckles, and he'd fight them. But that wasn't the way. That just got you into more trouble. Whereas if you used your head and found these little ways to, you could get a lot more. So that's what I was taught. But I spent years learning, studying law. And I used to read the law books that they use in courts. And I used to read them with a dictionary. And you had to apply to use to get the law books, and you'd get it, and you were allowed it for a certain time. And I wanted to learn to defend myself, because I didn't want to leave it just to my solicitor and barrister. I didn't want to be sat in the cell thinking, oh, I should have said this and I should have said that. So I learned to defend. I learned so well that other prisoners used to bring me their cases, and I would help them how to get off. And I was so successful at it in the end. So even though I spent a long time in prison on remands and various other sentences, I used the time to try and learn about the law, so I could understand what was going on in court and how to get my story right and everything. What will the jury believe? And so I did all that.
Lennox, tell me, right? This is fascinating chat, by the way. Did you ever fall foul of the old drugs yourself, or was it always just like purely sociable?
No, I broke my own rules. I fell foul of drugs when I fell on hard times. broken relationship that had really hurt me. I ended up paying for a prostitute, and my head was so my head was so messed up, that I wasn't enjoying the act she was doing on me. And so I kept her there I wouldn't pay her. I kept her there for a long time, until I thought she had sort of satisfied me. But I dropped my wallet. It fell out of my pocket and she picked it up. I didn't know. She gave it to her pimp, and they took the money out of it and everything and left all the rest intact. And the pimp called me on my phone and said he'd found my wallet and arranged to meet me. And he took a swing at me. I was still under the influence of drugs, but he took a swing at me and whacked me in the head with a claw hammer. And then we started fighting and got him on the floor and that. And then there was a police car who was watching all this, and they came and they wanted to know if I wanted to press charges, or I said no. And I tried to tell the guy, when the police weren't there, I'd spoke to him. I said, come and meet me again. Well, I spoke to him on the phone. I told him to come and meet me again, and I'll show you how to hit someone in the head. But he backed off. This was in Northampton. He wouldn't. But the rules were that you don't get drunk or under the influence of drugs, especially in another area. You just do it in a safe space with your friends and everything like that. Through difficult times, like I got into debt playing cards, poker with some friends, and when I lost, they said, right, if you drink this bottle of whiskey, we'll cancel your debt. And so I drank the bottle of whiskey. But when I got down to the last shot, I went to pick it up and knocked it over. And they said, all right, that's cancelled. And I saw this can of beer, and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll drink that can of beer instead. And they said, all right. I didn't even get halfway with the can of beer. It all come out. And so, to cut a long story short, they said, right, I'll tell you what you do. If you want the debt cleared, there's this guy who we don't like and we've got a grievance with. You take care of him and we'll cancel your debt. So I'd fallen on hard times, and I didn't have my usual weapons and things. I think I found this vanity kit in my friend's bathroom. I pulled out the scissors out of it and used it as a knuckle duster. And I went to where this guy lived, knocked on his door. He answered the door and straight in the face with it. And I knocked him unconscious in his doorway, and left him there, and went back to the guys and said, yeah, I've sorted him out. And they cancelled my debt. But so things like that, I did some stupid things through drugs, but I didn't realize that drugs was affecting me. It made me paranoid. I became more evil in my violence. There was a guy in Manchester who, again, I was on hard times, and he robbed me of some of my possessions. And, I got a knife and stabbed him in the eye. I was going to stab him in both eyes because I thought, if you're blind, you ain't going to be able to see to rob anyone again. I ended up doing several months in strange ways on remand, and then through having learnt how to defend myself in court, I was able to get acquitted. But it cost me, so drugs had made me have this other evil side. There were times then I could be a nice person, but there was this other side that was violent, and it affected me.
This sounds like coke. Am I right?
I did do some coke. Gave me a short fuse. I did do some coke, and that I did coke. I did a lot of ecstasy. I did a lot of cannabis. I did some hallucinogenic drugs, like acid. But the drug that I had most of the time was cannabis. What put me off was I saw what cocaine, heroin, crack cocaine, and some and speed had done to other people that I knew, how it affected them, and it made me think that if I got into it like that, it would make me either like them or worse. So I dabbled in the other Class A drugs, but so when I did cocaine, I snorted it and smoked it, and I didn't have it as regular as some of my friends. I didn't touch crack because I saw some huge guys who had started using crack cocaine, and not only did it change their personality, they lost so much weight and they became vulnerable. And I think as a criminal, you can't afford to be vulnerable. And if you're going in and out of prison all the time, you can't afford to be vulnerable. You could lose your life. And so I had to be careful. And so that's why I stuck with the cannabis most of the time. But I didn't realize that it was having the effect, I was tormented day and night by my abuses. I was traumatized, and even as I said I was with a prostitute, but at that stage I'd already had some help to deal with the effects of the rape, because before that I couldn't have people touch me, and in prison and sometimes out of prison I would see guys messing about and they tend to shag each other up the bum and stuff like that. And I used to, and then when I was in Grendon, I saw a lifer who was wearing makeup, had his legs shaved. He used to wolf whistle after another prisoner. And I said to the officers, I said, listen, if this guy does that to me, I'll kill him, and they said, oh, he won't do that to you. And so I struggled to have that interaction. The guys who were messing about, that's just how guys mess about. It doesn't affect me today, but back then. I forget where I was going with this. The drugs.
Yeah, I mean, you're what a lot of people watching won't understand, and that's fine. But you're battling serious childhood trauma, aren't you?
Yeah, of course.
And this is where these behaviours they're like a defence mechanism, because I had a lot of childhood trauma as well, and you'd be quite surprised, Lennox, how similar. I never went inside, but I can relate to, I can relate to just doing extreme things my whole life and not understanding why I've always been so extreme. In later life, fortunately, it was like adventure sport and stuff. But in my younger days, it was a lot of, crime and or not a lot, but I went through my crime period, and it's crazy when I look back. Would I hurt anyone? No way.
Yeah.
But back then, I honestly convinced myself this is how I needed to live, and it was fine. It was fine to go around, taking stuff off other people, because like, what the fuck did they care about me?
Yeah.
That was my mentality. And again,
I saw myself as kind of like a Robin Hood at one stage, because people used to come to me to ask me to sort out their problems. I stabbed a lot of times a drug dealer who was robbing single parents of money. They would buy, a bit of weed off them because they wanted to have a bath and a spliff after the kids are in bed and just have a relax. And this guy would take the mickey and not give them their money's worth, and sometimes give them rubbish drugs. And so I would take care of him and give them money back and stuff. But what I was trying to say with the sex thing is that being in a gang and being involved in girls and wanting to show yourself as normal, when it come to being with a girl, I had to try to perform. You couldn't be yourself, and I couldn't allow people. I couldn't have a girl or someone think I'm some weirdo because I can't have sex or something like that. So I had this kind of act. I would become. It was like schizophrenia. I mean, I would become this other person, and my whole aim was to make sure, just to please this girl, so she would say nice things about me. I had to hide my abuse, and so in my criminal days I did that. I had help when I was 18. A girl helped me to actually have penetrative sex because I didn't know. I was so damaged, and it was an emotional experience. But after that, being in a gang and having to try and be normal when it comes to girls, women, it was just a performance. It's only like in meaningful relationships can you be yourself. I was so damaged, and if I thought someone was having a go or making me feel a particular way, I would approach them, and the next thing I would lunge at them with a knife if I didn't have a gun to shoot.
So Lennox, just before I want to talk about, your, let's just use the word recovery. You know what I mean? Your way out, I mean. But before I do that, I just want to ask you, what's it like to go on an armed robbery? And were the guns loaded or were they just for show?
The guns on some occasions were loaded, but there were times when you didn't have time to get a loaded gun. Guns were expensive, and sometimes you could borrow guns as well. But what it was like when I got better at committing armed robberies, because initially you don't always get training to do a good armed robbery or to use a gun. We ended up going to Newbury into some woodlands and firing guns to learn how to shoot them, but when I got better at it, because we had guys in the post office who The organised crime gang, they had people everywhere, and they used to pay people for information and things. But the post office people used to tell us, stop using your mobile phones to talk about jobs. They said the police are intercepting these wave airwaves, and so that we ended up using walkie-talkies. We also started using stun guns, not like the stun gun we had. They were more like cattle prodders at first, the ones that we got. And I remember one time we wanted to test it out, and so me and a couple of boys, we waited in an alley, and we thought, right, the first man that comes down this alley on his own, we'll test it out on him. And when this guy came down, we approached him and started shocking him with the stun guns just to see how it would be, And so we used to do that. But what it's like being the adrenaline. So I got to a stage where I wanted to make sure that I did everything to get away with the crime. And so I had to prepare myself. Give you an example. I couldn't be with my girlfriend and her children and be playing with the kids and having that family time and intimacy, and then go and do an armed robbery, because the switch from that role, was too quick, and it made you make mistakes. So what I had to do whenever I wanted to do an armed robbery, I had to go take 2-3 hours out and kind of prepare your mind. I'd go jogging, I'd be thinking about the job, and I would just try to stir up this kind of other side to me, that I could, be viciously violent if I had to someone, because I needed to make sure I'd get away with the money. And on one of the occasions, a woman had the bag of money, and I tried to grab it off her. Now, I had my mentors from the organised crime gang across the road watching what was going on. They used to come and watch me at work, and she wouldn't let go of the bag, and I had to beat her to get her to let go of the bag of money. And she did eventually, and I got away. And in a short space of time, the police had got their helicopters, and they'd got police blocking almost every exit to this estate where I was at. I was taking the takings that from a pub that I was asked to do, and I got away, but I ran over garden fences and things, and there was this house, and the people in there, they let me come in their house and sort of hide. So they made me drinks and stuff. I gave them some money from what I'd taken, and thankfully, because of their help, I was able to escape the police. But the adrenaline, the rush, it's your heart is racing, and you have to put on an act. One of the jobs I was doing, you pointing a gun in someone's face, you're telling them, open the fucking safe or else I'll blow your face off. And any attempt to delay what you're doing you're striking them. I put the gun in front of a manager's face. He started to take his time a bit, and I whacked him on the back of the neck, and he went to sleep. And so I had to get other staff members to open the safe and stuff, and had a guy standing by the door to take care of any customers and things. And on another job through organised crime, the head bouncer of a nightclub we were robbing, the head bouncer owed my drug dealing gang, money for drugs. And part of the payment, he had to leave the fire exit door open and let us know when the managers were coming out with their takings. We went there, balaclavas, stun guns, handcuffs, walkie-talkies, we had all that. And we shocked them up, beat them a little bit, handcuffed them to the railings, took the money. We put it in a parked van that we had pre-prepared, and we went to a safe house, and then a guy would come along on his motorbike, open the van, take the money, and take it to our safe house, So we did things like that. But as you get more experienced, because one of my less experienced times where I was unprepared, I didn't even have a gun. I just had like a rounder's bat. Yeah, had a rounder's bat. And what had happened, I'd gone into the label exchange pub, and the landlord had a grievance with the pub next door, and they were right next door to each other. And so he gave me inside information. He wanted me to rob next door, me and my mate. And we done it as a spur of the moment thing, because the pub next door, they had gone away on holiday, but there was one guy, a nephew or something, one of their family members was looking after the pub. So we went there at night and got in, and we had cut sleeves off a jumper, put holes in them, and it was quite comical because, like, when I put mine on, I couldn't see properly, and it kept moving. So when I confronted this guy, I used to have to lift it up, bash him, and put it back down. So there was lots of dialogue of me asking where's the safe and everything, and we managed to get there and clean the safe out. And I also found another place where there was a few grand hidden. But yeah, we beat this guy, but I had to keep lifting up my mask because the holes were moving. It was like a scene out of Django. If anyone has seen Django, the film, when they got the Ku Klux Klan have got these hoods on and they can't see. Well, I couldn't see. It was pitch dark. But when I lifted it up, I could see a bit. And so, that's the kind of thing, if you're unprepared. So there were times when I had real guns, real bullets. But there were times when you had to improvise, and you either had imitation or you didn't have access to a gun because it was short notice, and the person who was supposed to bring the guns got into a few problems. You don't hear all this stuff when you watch films. It just all seems to run so smoothly. But in real life, for me at the time, it wasn't so smooth. There were times when you got lucky and you did a job and you got loads of money. I went to Bournemouth to do a job, and we took real guns with us, and it was supposed to be 90 grand in this manager's hotel room or whatever, and there was a few of us there, and we got into a few problems because with the way we dressed, brought attention to the staff, and some male staff approached us in the lift, and in the end they realized these guys are not customers. They come to rob the place, and so they started fighting us, and I pulled out a gun, and while I was fighting with them, it went off, boom, right in the, but because of that, we realized that the noise would have drawn a lot of attention. There'd be armed police coming, and so we had to cut our losses and escape. Yeah, there were times you had to improvise. It's a scary experience because you can't prepare for the unexpected. You don't know that when you're doing your robbery, an off-duty policeman might be going about his business and he clocks you or clocks something that you're doing. You don't know if a member of the public, has realized what's going on. And because of their training, it could be an ex-soldier or something who thinks, do you know what, I'm trained for this. I can take these guys out. You just don't know, and you can't prepare for the unexpected. You try to prepare as much as you can. It's like we wanted to do a jeweler's shop and get loads of Rolexes, and so what we done, because it was a time when there was a lot of terrorist bombing, IRA and stuff, and what we'd done, we got someone who could speak in an Irish accent to phone the police and tell them there's a bomb at a certain place, so that they would all go there and leave us. We wanted like 60 seconds to, you get in the shop and you get the watches from the front, but you also get some from the back. You had 60 seconds because we thought in 60 seconds they're not going to be here. And so it's very scary because you just don't know if things are going to go smoothly or what. We used to get someone to phone up the police and say there's an altercation in this block of flats at the top floor, and this guy has got a knife or something and he's threatening people with it. The police would come and go up to this address, and our car thieves will go into their car and take their overcoat with their fluorescent thing on saying police, and any spare hats and things there. So that's what we needed, because we were going to rob a bank when they first come there, or when the manager first comes there to open up. And we took some petrol with us, pour it over him, type in the right code or we'll torture, and we'll shoot him in the kneecap. Next one's in your face, so we were like that. It's a very scary experience to do an armed robbery today, where there's less money being used. You have to be smarter. There's you either have to be a tech person to be able to do fraud, get money fraudulently and get money transferred into accounts, or trying to rob a bank, I don't think they keep as much money there as they used to. So it's not the same. You're going to be disappointed. So you have to have your information right. If you're going to try and steal cash from anywhere, you've got to have your information right. Otherwise, you're going to come unstuck. But it's a scary experience, running away from the scene, choosing the right time, especially where, you've got these protesters holding up traffic. It's a prime time to do a robbery because it's hard for the police to get through the traffic. You need to be getting away on motorbikes so that you can get away. So you have to think like that. If you did it, but it's a very scary experience. And 22 armed robberies, it gives you a bit of experience. You may make a lot of mistakes at the beginning, but as you do more and more of them, you get a bit more experienced. You know what to look for, what to do. But I used to eventually prepare myself and make sure the guys that were with me also prepared and did jogging and stuff like that. It was just so hard to come from playing with little children one minute, and then the next minute you're doing a job. It messed with my head. So I if I was with my girlfriend and her kids, I'd have to make sure I took enough time out to change, to find this person who could do that job. Otherwise, it messed with my head too much, switching from those two scenes, those two roles. I just couldn't do it.
And so, Lennox, what was your sort of wake up call? When did you have like a rock bottom moment and you thought this can't go on, or what happened?
Well, falling out with both gangs was, for me, kind of like worse than having a relationship breakup, really. And I didn't have the security of the organized crime gang. One of the guys in the organized crime gang, he let me down on a job I was doing, and he was a lookout. And when I said to my mate, when I was about to open a safe, let me just have one quick last look out the window, I saw all these police cars with lights flashing, no noise. And the guy who was supposed to be keeping a lookout was on his phone. He weren't even alerting us. So that led to me falling out with them. And I took him with some other guys to some wasteland, and we poured petrol over him and was going to torch him. Because I said, you put our lives at risk. You can't come on a job and be slacking like that. You should have alerted us that the police had gone, because what happened, we triggered an alarm when we moved the safe. If I didn't go and have a last look, I would have been caught. So there was a breakdown in relationships with these gangs, and I realized I was willing to put my life on the line for them, and they weren't the same. They did silly things that put me at risk, and I thought, should I really be associated with these people that were letting me down like this? And it made me angry. It made me rage. I wanted to take them out. And so one of the things that came to a halt was it was with that travel agents, and I did the armed robbery a week later, and we got away, but we went to a safe house and we gave this young 18-year-old money, guns, and our clothes. And we put it in a bag, and he was supposed to take it to another safe house, and we were going to meet up there. But on the police radio, they said they were looking for any black man with a bag. And he, who wasn't involved in the robbery, was walking across the road, and the police car was coming, and it pulled him over, searched the bag and found this evidence. And so he got arrested. Now, ordinarily, in my circle of criminals, if someone takes the rap for you, it's your responsibility to look after them while they're in prison and their family. And if you don't, you're worse than a snitch. Do you know what I mean? Your name is mud. It's just one of those rules. And so I got to find out that this young man was the grandson of a guy who used to visit my parents' house when I was a little boy, and he was always very nice to me. And, he used to speak up for me when my parents were being too strict and horrible to me. And when I found out that he's the grandson of this man who I had every respect for, I thought, I can't let his grandson go to prison. So I called my solicitor and I told my solicitor, listen, I need to have an interview with the police and do a deal, because they got the wrong guy and everything. And my solicitor, who used to prosecute corrupt police in Australia, and had to move out of Australia because he'd won a big case and his life was in danger. He was trying to beg me, no, they don't know anything about you, Lennox. You just leave it alone. And I was relentless. I wouldn't. So we got to CID. And I told them, this isn't the right person. I can tell you who is, but I want immunity. No prosecution for me. They went back to their superiors, who agreed on the condition that I not just confessed about that crime, but all my crimes. So my solicitor, against his better judgment, decided to go with what I was wanting. And he made sure that everything was, all the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed, and they done the deal. When this kid went to court, the prosecution stood up and they had all the evidence on the table, and they stood up and they said, Your Honor, we offer no evidence against this young man. The press ran out of the court, and this case went to Parliament, and the CPS wanted someone to pay for it. So the police now started to look back through the evidence that I'd given, and they researched and they found a thumbprint of mine, and they decided to prosecute me. The CID came to me and they said, we're sorry, we made a deal with you, but our superiors are going to stab you in the back. And so it went to Supreme Court. And my barrister was 6 months fighting my case. And in the end, the Supreme Court said to the police, they said, you made a deal with a criminal, and all the I's are dotted and the T's crossed. And they said, you made a deal, and so you have to stick with it. And so they, because when I confessed all my crimes, I only confessed about what I did, not about who was with me or anything like that. That was part of it too. And so now I look at my DBS and there's lots of crimes missing because they had to wipe it out. And so what's happened now, when they released me from prison, I met with my barrister and my solicitor, and the police came, one of the heads of police, and they handed me these letters, and the letter said that there's a contract out on my life and the money paid. And they advised me to get out of town. They said, because, someone's put a contract out on you. And I spent a little bit of time trying to find out who's put a contract out on me. And I went to my enemies, I went to the gangs, and there was no one. So I thought the police had done this because I had won my case in court. And it was at a time when the police were trigger happy. They were making arrests, house arrests, with armed police, and before you know it, someone was getting shot. It was the wrong person getting shot and things like that. And I thought, because I'd been arrested by armed police about 4 times, and the last time they came, they caused so much damage and everything, and arrested me and my girlfriend and the kids. And I thought, what they're going to do is they're going to come and arrest me, shoot me, and say we thought he was going for a gun, because it was I was known to use guns and knives, and I was called by one of the judges a very violent and dangerous man. So they were telling me to get way out of town, not just up the road. And so I travelled the country, getting out of town, and I used the letters to get benefits. I had a supervisor who used to deal with my claim. The council used to give me flats in different areas, and I lived like that for a bit. But so I fell on difficult times, trying to rebuild my life, and move around as well, because I had to watch out for the police. I knew about corrupt police because they were in the gang. And so I had reason to be worried. And I thought, okay, I've done a lot of dirty work for them, but these kind of organized criminals, they know people in the forces. They knew people who were a gun for hire. And, so I started, I didn't think myself as any big man. I thought, you know what? They could get someone. I mean, like, we used to pay drug addicts, give them a gun, give them loads of drugs, shoot this person, and they'd do it, So it was very easy for the organized crime gang. I mean, the guy we poured petrol over, because I wanted him to give me what I lost. And the moment he got his freedom to try and get me some money, he was out of the country. So, but yeah, so I eventually ended up homeless on the streets of London. While I was homeless, I was up and down the country in different places, and eventually settled more on the streets of London. I was homeless. I'd got nothing, and I was going through a terrible time in the winter. It was a very cold winter, and my body started to shut down. Lost so much weight, where I hadn't eaten for ages, for some days, and hadn't drank much water, or any water. And my mouth, it looked like, or felt like, I was in a desert, and you're trying to get water. My mouth had changed color, and I thought, I'm going to die here. So I didn't want to die on the streets of London. I remembered that a judge said to me, if you get convicted for another knife crime offence, you'll get sent to prison for the rest of your life. And I thought, that's got to be better than dying on the streets. And I can hide in prison. I'll probably be the only person that wants to be there. And so it took me a week to find a man on his own that I could pick a fight with and hurt, So, because on Oxford Street, there's loads of families, kids. I thought, I don't want to traumatize these kids, and hurt one of their family members in front of them. So 11 o'clock at night, I met someone at a cash point. I asked him, he got any spare change? And before he could answer, I stuck a Brador in him, and he screamed, and he dropped his wallet. For a few seconds, I thought I could grab that, and I'd forgotten what I was trying to do. And instinct and adrenaline took over, and I decided to run. He decided to run. We were running in the same direction, side by side at one stage, and he looked at me, I looked at him, and he screamed and ran the opposite direction. And, you know, it was only afterwards I thought, why did I run? I wanted the police to catch me. But I'd run to the end of the road and turned left, and I saw this alley, and I ran towards this alley that was really dark. And as I got into it, I thought, wow, I've never known a darkness like this. I couldn't even see my own hands. And I had to feel the walls to find my way through this alley, and bumped into these industrial bins and sat between them. And I sat there sobbing, you know, and it was while I was there, you know, and thinking, oh God, please help this guy. I really didn't mean to. I didn't really want to hurt him, you know. I've used him for my own selfish needs. That's what I was thinking in my head. But then this other experience happened to me right there while I was sat there. I mean, it amazes me now that I had this particular experience. I'd like to share it with you, but I don't know if I should or not.
You got to now.
You could read it all in the book.
Yeah, we're gonna give your book a good shout out and put up a few thumbnails of it. But
I had an experience in that alley that made me get up and find a policeman and go to the police station and hand myself in. The experience freaked me out, and I handed myself in. They got me 2 CID that were like 6 foot odd, and they said, Lennox, we want to hear all your story. Several hours I was in there talking to these guys. One of them ran out to get more tissues. They were emotional about some of the things I was sharing. And they said to me, do you know what? We're going to get you the best lawyer in London. And I said, I don't care if you get me Mickey Mouse. I'm not really fussed about the consequences. And so anyway, I ended up in prison. I wrote a letter to the judge. I told the judge I did it. I said, throw the book away, throw the key away, throw the book at me. And I saw him with my letter, and the judge was telling me, I'm not going to give you life. I don't think you really meant to do this. And I ended up with like 3 years, you know, but that experience, ever since that, I just was looking for help. I had therapy from a counselor in there. I had that gang leader come and see me every day, coaching and mentoring me. You know, I mean, I got a job as a cleaner, and someone spat on my floor, and I threw a dirty T-shirt at him to clean it up. He wouldn't do it. And so I started to follow him to his cell. I thought, I'll take your effing head off, mate. And I was stopped by that experience I had in the alley and challenged. And I ended up I calmed, I diffused the situation. But, you know, I couldn't, it didn't stop me wanting to fight people and hurt people who crossed my path. But, you know, when it came to it, somehow, because I had decided to make a change, I had to diffuse the situation. And that change continued when I got out. You know, I've been running this charity for nearly 18 years, be 18 years in January.
Can you tell us a bit about it?
It's I came out of prison, and I was asked to talk to a 40-strong gang in southeast London who were using guns and knives, terrorizing the community and having other gang fights with other gangs. And they wanted to know about prison. So I told them all about prison, and they sat listening for a couple of hours, and girls were starting to confess that they'd been sexually abused and raped. Other guys decided, you know what, I don't want this life. One guy ran away to Manchester, and it freaked me out. I thought, gosh, looking at these guys' faces and girls, they just look like little kids on big bodies, you know, because they were big for their age, some of them. And I thought, how can I prevent them from going through a life like mine? My now wife had asked me, what do you want these kids to do? I said, I want them to refocus their life. And so that's where I got the name from. But so I started doing these talks. I was invited places to discourage young people from a life of crime. And I worked for nothing for a year. And then eventually started to get some funding for travel and stuff. Weren't in it for the money, but I thought, I can't say sorry to the people that have been hurt at my hands. You know, I've stabbed people in the face, in the neck, and various other places. I've beat the crap out of lots of people and robbed lots of people. And I said, I can't say sorry, you know, because they're not going to take sorry and think, oh yeah, you're sorry, so we'll forgive you. But what I can do, I thought I could still say sorry, but what I can do is I can try to prevent other young people taking up a life like mine. And I thought that would be a good way to say sorry, you know. And so that's what I started doing. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, it's been going really well. I've rescued hundreds of kids from gangs. You know, I've represented kids in court and helped them get off and helped them to make a change. I've helped a lot of adults and families. It's been good job satisfaction. You know, I just hope that the people that have been affected by my crimes, you know, can one day find it in their heart to forgive. But, you know, anyone listening to this might see me smiling or laughing when I'm talking about certain things, but I am sorry for all the hurt and pain that I've caused others. You know, and I know that just saying sorry isn't enough. But you know, I really do take the work I do seriously. I'm transparent about my life story. You know, my son, who I hadn't seen since he was 15 months old, grew up in America. Now he's in the UK. He ended up in a gang and he's killed someone, stabbed someone, and he's doing 22 years in prison now. He's got about 7 years left. I tell him he wishes he listened to me, because he didn't listen to me when he was going to court. And I saw the family of the person that he killed. He was an 18-year-old boy, and his mum and sister was at court, and they were beyond broken. And they wished my son would rot in hell. And, you know, I tell my son, I say, every time you have a bad day in prison, remember you're still breathing. I said, that family have no hope now of seeing their son, who was a drug addict, you know, make a change. He killed this guy because he robbed him of £10 worth of crack cocaine. So the boy died for a tenner. So, you know, I try to, I mean, my son has made a lot of changes. You know, and the prison I've seen that, you know, this guy, he doesn't seem the same sort of person as he was when he came in. But it doesn't change. I mean, this family has lost their son, their brother, and you know, I try to help my son now to um, make that change, and I'm making some headway. The proof will be when he comes out one day, if he does, because you don't tend to get parole first time. He has to do every day of that 22 years. But if they refuse you when you go for parole after 22 years, you've got to wait 3 years before you can apply again. So it'd be 25 years. And if they refuse you again, you wait another 3. And that's how it goes. And then when you're out, you're on license for life. But you don't get out straight away when they say yes. You've got to, if you're in a Cat B prison, you've got to work your way to a Category D prison and get a date of release and things like that. So, yeah, I am really remorseful. I wish I lived a different life. I wish I stayed and was a father to my son and my daughter. Kids at school, when I go to schools and teach kids about how easy it is to get trapped into gangs and stuff, they say to me, what's the worst crime you committed? And I tell them the worst crime I committed is I wasn't there for my son or my daughter. I've been kind of like, on the streets, they call you a waste man. I've been a waste of space, really, a poor excuse of a father, a sperm donor, and I wish I was like some other men who've stuck around for their kids and been a part of their life. I mean, now I am with my son and my daughter, but it's taken years. So now I specialize in helping to get kids to break that cycle of offending, and I rescue them from some of the gangs that they're involved in and try to help them to change their thinking so they change their behavior. But yeah, I'm not. People say to me, well, you had an abusive life yourself, but I think I could have made better choices. I made some bad choices. And I don't think that being racially abused, being raped, was an excuse to go and hurt other people. I think I should have taken the advice of some of the good people that tried to encourage me and change my path for my own selfish gain.
Why is knife crime so prevalent? I'm going to say in the black community, but I have had another armed robber on the show who said, no, Chris, it's equal black and white, right? I don't know if you got a view on that. On this show, or when I'm doing my talking to the camera, because I'm a qualified youth worker, that's my degree. And I actually did my university thesis, they call it. I did it on gangs. That there's a lot of absent fathers and therefore a lack of role models, and these young men are angry. They don't fit in I say young men, but young men and women, but they don't fit in at school. They can't apply themselves. So therefore they're not going to go to, higher education. So they're not going to get the Rolex. They're not going to get the Mercedes. And therefore, A, they're really angry, which is why they'll pull out a blade. And B, they'll go into things like, county lines and this kind of stuff as a source of income and prestige, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a mix of things. I think for a lot of kids, one, they have tried at school. They have met difficulties with teachers not helping them progress. Some of the kids have got some mental health issues or problems with ADHD and things, and learning. And so some schools just like to move them to pupil referral units, where it's more difficult to learn because a lot of the children there have got issues and they're very toxic with each other. But some kids, white and black, they listen to their parents talk about how difficult it is. Those without a father feel, some of them without a father feel that it's their responsibility to provide, to take on that male role. There are some young carers out there, and there are some young carers I take my hat off to, because they're not getting involved in that, but they are doing all they can to look after a parent who might be disabled or whatever. There are others who have allowed themselves to get involved into the gang culture. But there are these kids who also have been traumatized by things that have happened to them in their childhood. And so it just so happens that a lot of there is a lot of black children doing it. It doesn't seem to be highlighted as much amongst some of the white kids, but from my personal experience of working with children, there is a lot of white kids who are caught up in it. And also with knife crime, I mean, I've spoken to so many adults. I mean, there was this white mum who put herself on the news, and she said she don't let her boys leave the house without a knife. Because she thinks, well, it's not safe out there, and I'd rather you come home than not. But there is a kind of false belief out there that everyone's carrying a knife, and kids are so petty with some of their arguments with other children, so they've decided to carry a knife to defend themselves. They feel much safer. But I've met a lot of adults who have got something in the boot of their car. They sleep with something under their pillow or bed. Women who carry weapons in their handbags. None of this is highlighted. I've met, because of the demand for drugs, I've met grandmothers. Oh yeah, I enjoy a good spliff and everything like that. And but yes, there is a lot of attention drawn to these young black lads. And yes, they are, and a lot of them have come from difficult backgrounds. That is a very true, thing about these groups of people. That they've come from difficult backgrounds. They're either one-parent families. They're on low income. The demographics of they live in a poor area. And then you've got these gang members who have profited from crime, and they flaunt their profits, and they try to make it look. It's very easy, to tempt these children. They'll give them money to buy trainers, to buy clothes, and they'll just be nice to them, and they'll be like a sugar daddy, and take them under their wing. They'll sort of, and the kids, if you're going through a difficult time, I mean, if someone had done that to me, I would have been easy led to attach myself to this person, because they're always nice to me. They give me money. They, I can buy things for myself. And so, people are seeing that a lot, and then, where the gangs have done so well, that the National Crime Agency said they're making, a couple of £1 billion a year from this drug trade. But they're meeting a demand. But the gangs, they know how to manipulate these kids. They know how to exploit them and groom them, and trap them into doing this. And, you know, you have to think, well, if you want to trap these kids into these gangs, you've got to put fear into them. They have, you know, because if you don't, they'll decide, oh, I ain't going to do this anymore. So they do. They have sexually abused them. They've raped boys and girls and filmed it and threatened to show it on social media sites or to their families. They've beat them badly. And these kids who are trapped into this lifestyle end up doing anything to make sure they do what they're supposed to do. They disobey their parents. They miss school. They go missing for days and weeks, where they're in a trap house learning how to hide drugs on their body, how to prepare drugs, all sorts of things. There's been an 11-year-old girl who's had to sleep with different boys in a trap house to pay her way to stay there. There's all sorts of atrocities. I was asked by social services to work with a 17-year-old boy in Dartford who was initially from London, and his job was to actually sexually abuse girls and boys and physically abuse them too. It's only that the case of his crimes took a different turn, so I didn't get to actually work with him because, you know, I can't work. I'm not allowed to really work with sex offenders because I'm working with vulnerable children and adults. You know, then I may have been able to give some advice, you know, but he was damaged himself. So yes, you're right in, you know, there is a high number of black kids who seemingly get involved in this, you know, but I think with the kind of education and things that is getting out there, there are some kids who are staying away from it, you know, but, you know, I go into schools and I hold up £100 cash. Who wants £100? There isn't a hand that isn't up in the air. I said, all you've got to do is hold my bag for 5 minutes. I'll show them what's in the bag first. I say, I won't try and fool you. I'll show you what's in the bag first. If you still want to hold the bag, then after you've seen what's in it, then keep your hand up. And when I show them the drugs. And as I'm showing them the drugs, I'm telling them what the British law says about having these things in your possession. And if you give it to anyone else, and what could happen to them as children for doing that. And there's so many hands still up, and there's black hands, there's white hands, from all backgrounds. You know, money knows no color. You know, and everybody wants it. And sometimes I say, well, I'll tell you what, I'm feeling generous today. I'm not just going to give you £100. I'm going to give you a PlayStation, a PS4 as well. Or, you know, I add these things, and, you know, they're even more excited. You know, or, you know, I say, well, you know, you can either have beans on toast tonight, or you can have steak and chips. You know, you can pay your mum's fuel bills. You can buy your shopping, you know, every hand. And, all right, there are some hands that do come down, but, you know, they're tempted, especially if they think they'll get away with it. But I show them how easy it is to get trapped. And I share with them some of the case studies, and you know, it freaks them out. But I think because of this type of education, I'm seeing a lot of kids who just seemingly know people that have got involved in it, but they're not doing it. They're too, the wrong thing is to be tempted by the money. But when you've got the cost of living crisis and various other things going on, it's very hard to walk away from free, easy money. So it's the best time for these criminal gangs to commit crimes and to exploit children, because the government, the judicial system doesn't seem to be, exercising their laws. Now some kids, if they get trapped in it, they can get out of it through Modern Day Slavery Act. But I mean, I've got a 15-year-old boy who's in prison now. And he had a good day selling drugs for these gangs. He's a mixed race, a black young guy. And he used to have a knife down his tracksuit, big knife. And it's the common practice of some county line gangs to reward the kids when they've had a good day selling drugs. Now, this kid was given a girl. Go and have sex with this boy. Now, anything the gang tell you, you've got to go and do. And these girls in the gang, they hide drugs in their hair, on their person. They'll hide weapons. They will be used to have sex with, and perform other sexual acts for any of the gang members. So they gave him a girl. And he went to a wooded area so she can perform an act on him. He took the knife out of his tracksuit, but put it on the floor. And I think whilst they were getting it on, they were interrupted by the girl's friend. So they never finished what they were doing. And the girl's friend, I think she used to be with this. She's had sex with this guy before, got a bit jealous because he didn't want her anymore. So she ended up telling the girl's mum, but where he thought the girl was 14, she was 12. And the mum kicked off at her daughter, but then decided to make her out a victim. He's been arrested for, aggravated sexual offence, and the other girl who was jealous has also decided to say he raped her and things like that. And so he's in prison, and then there's this white mum with two 12-year-old boys who has given her 12-year-old boys drugs to give out to, I was doing some outreach in a park. You see these two boys going to these adults who parked up their work vans, giving them drugs. And they've been involving their mates as well. I remember doing an armed robbery because my dad was struggling to pay the bills. And I got the money and I gave it to my dad. And my mum came along and kicked off, where'd you get all this money from and all that, and gave me the 3rd degree. And so she told me to get out and take that stolen money with me. And so when she'd gone away, I said to my dad, I said, well, you've got all these watches you keep collecting. Let me buy all them watches off you. And he was up for it. He was well up for it because he was skint and he was working, but all his money went on bills and he was struggling to cope, and it used to make him cry. But my mum was quite adamant. My mum found a way to cope with the cost of living crisis at the time. She got a group of friends, about 15 friends, and they all used to put in a tenner. And every week they'd take it in turns to have the pot. Wasn't a lot of money, but it helped when you haven't got a lot. So looking at this mum with the two boys, I could see the desperation, the same desperation I had. And for some of the kids that get involved in these gangs that will buy your food at McDonald's, or they will take care of any bullying issues. They'll give you a lift to school and befriend you. And they're using kids to befriend kids. And I can see the desperation that some of these children have, you know, in wanting that money to help their family. And it's very hard, you know. The solution, I mean, kids are carrying knives because if you are involved in a gang, you've got to protect the product. Otherwise, you're going to get it. This 14-year-old boy from London came to Margate to sell drugs, but where he'd never seen the seaside before, forgot his drugs and the money in the bag and left it on the train. He went to a petrol station with some money he had in his pocket and bought a tow rope to go and hang himself. And it's the way he did it. I think someone followed him and managed to stop him before he was able to hang himself. I mean, he had seen what the gang does to other children and was petrified. He thought, well, I might as well kill myself. Going to die anyway. And he was a white kid. But there is a lot of black on black violence amongst young black boys. And it's petty stuff, you know. I've worked in a children's prison. I've seen some horrible issues, but they have come from these backgrounds. But there is a way, I think, to solve it, but I don't think it's a way the government will be interested in doing. They'll rather look for other ways, you know. Whereas I think that because I've experienced myself as a child some of these models and an adult, I think there's so many prisons that have been shut. I think if they were to revamp them and turn them into small communities with a school in it, a healthcare centre, some shops, better living quarters, and you know, with these kids and training and everything, the ones at risk you could take off the streets and put in these places. And initially they're going to be in a place where you haven't got a lot, because that you've got to unpick that negative behavior. And I had therapeutic help. You have psychodrama and all that kind of stuff to, and I think these kids need to have that specialist help to unpick that negative behavior. Then you've got to teach, you know, give them an education. You've got to teach them how to manage, you know, you teach them people skills. You know, you put them in an environment which is like society, but it hasn't got those dangers of people trying to groom them and being in dysfunctional families, and it's secure. And you've got business people who will give them a job after they've got their education, or they could be asked if they'd like to go into the forces, and the forces, once they've had that behavior, negative behavior unpicked, they could go into the forces, some of them. But what you're going to do, you're going to produce children who young adults who are not at risk anymore. They could go into the wider society and be able to have a better chance at life, and they got new hope. And these gangs are not going to be able to tempt them, because they've had all that negative crap unpicked. They're in a better position. They could go back into their families and provide in some way and contribute in some way. And so for those at risk, I think they need that type of thing. It works, you know. Whereas if you try to give them that kind of help whilst they're in the community, they're still a target. whilst you know, it's like Anne Longfield has decided to try and provide this type of help for kids in the community and their families, but the gangs can still get at them. Whereas these prisons, they won't be prisons anymore. They'd be like small, there's housing in there. Do you know what I mean? And so you're not decriminalizing the kids. You're reprogramming them, and you know, they're in a place where you know, they can live peacefully. The male and female staff are surrogate mums and dads with skills, for want of a better term. Do you know what I mean? Because they're helping these kids to have what they should have had, really. So you can do that with the ones at risk, and I think it will make a change. When you let them go into the wider society, they'll be better human beings. You know, because you've put something in them. You know, and I think you can apply that model to drug addicts in Scotland. You can have a community where all the help is geared to help them with their issues. You can have that same kind of model with people with mental health issues, where all the help provided, but the cost for to revamp that place, to have the right staff with those you know, professional skills to be able to work with, you know, it's costly, but in the long run it saves a lot more money. I think it's worth doing more than what the suggestion of Anne Longfield did. You know, I don't think that she's trying to do a good thing, but I think that the money would be better used to do a model like that. And I think that you're rescuing kids in a much better way than if you tried to help them where they're at, because it's there's too many outside influences that will try to destroy all that.
How can people get hold of you to book your services?
Through our website.
Okay, we'll put a link below. That's what, refocus dot something.
Yeah, www.refocusproject.org.uk. They can. There's a referral page as well. You know, and they can, if they fill in the referral form, it gets sent to us, and we respond. You know, but we specialize. I specialize now in rescuing kids from those types of situations, and also I'm a qualified mentor coach. I'm registered with the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. I've got an equivalent master's certificate with them in learning and development. You know, so I like to practice good practice, and you know, so if people need our help, I'm helping adults and I'm helping kids. The youngest I work with is 8 years old. The oldest is older than myself, and you know, we use our lived experiences and various other things depending on what people need to help them, you know, so they can get through to us on our website. And you can also get a book from the website as well.
How's the book been doing?
Really well. I'm just about to sign a contract to do the audio version of the book. So, you know, later today I'll be testing myself, reading it, recording it, and sending it to the book people. But yeah, so we're going to do an audio version. It's been doing really well. Some of the comments, I mean, a lot of people who have put a review on, they've said it's been hard to put down, the book. But
good.
So that's the kind of book I like to read. So yeah, so, and the money goes to help us help other people. So I've got a lot of young guys that I've helped turn their lives around, and they're now helping other young people turn their lives around. I get a lot of referrals from kids referring kids. So it's all good.
Brilliant. And you're up there in Kent for anyone that's watching.
Yeah, and I work all over the country now. I used to just work in Kent and Southeast London, but because of the demand, the furthest person away that I've been helping is Southampton. But Oxford I've done Surrey. I've had to go to Surrey because an 8-year-old boy took a knife into school to stab his classmate. And I've gone in and we've done a session to help them and that. So I raised my own funds. And so we've managed to raise some funds to help us to travel to other places and help people who just really haven't got the funds to be able to afford, the help. So we thought that was important, but we practically go anywhere. And when I'm working with a local prison, and when some of their inmates come out and they've got to go to areas outside of Kent, I still support them, and help them through that journey to break the cycle of offending.
Lennox, it's been a fascinating chat, mate. Thank you so much. I'm obviously delighted that your life's in a good place.
Yeah.
And you're able to give so much back. And I always say, like, the past doesn't exist. It's only now, isn't it? We've only got now. And you're seizing the day. I wish you the best of luck with the book as well. We'll put all the links below the podcast. Friends at home, hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. If you can like and subscribe. If you want Lennox's services, there'll be a link below for the website. And much love to you all. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Chris.
Hey, no problem.